They don't pass enough bills. You can criticize in Albany that we pass too much of them. Mark Twain says that your life, liberty, and property are at risk when the legislature is in session. And I can tell you that up in Albany, we deal with a whole lot of different topics and a lot of different bills that got voted on. That was it was a more emotional vote. I enjoyed being as open-minded as possible, but unfortunately, I had to, for the advocates, I had to vote no.
Next question comes from Mike of Hampton Bays, and it deals with war. Something that seems to be on the horizon here. He'd like to know what you anticipate another war, and will you support what's going to happen if we do have one?
Well, nobody in this room, hopefully, would want war. Sometimes certain conflicts find us. Other times we seem to go out and find them. In this particular situation, we're dealing with a new conflict with ISIS or ISIL, and it's a very real threat to our interests. Unfortunately, the president's strategy, and I hate saying it, but I'm just being candid here, the president's strategy has a 0% chance of working, and I really wish that it did. I really do. But he's using military airstrikes and relying on the local ground forces. I've been to Iraq, I've met the Iraqi army, I've spent time with Iraqi law enforcement. It is a victory to get them to show up for work. If it's a precinct that's a quarter mile from your house and you're expecting a 0% threat of anything happening in your jurisdiction that day, just getting you to show up is a victory. To expect this element that won't show up to work to bring the fight to destroy ISIS on the ground, an element that makes Al-Qaeda look like Boy Scouts, is entirely unrealistic. I think that, now the president contradicted himself in his speech. He says this war is going to be, this is going to be different like anything in the past in Iraq and Afghanistan because there's not going to be any boots on the ground. And then in the same exact speech he says, I'm sending another 495 troops to Iraq. So I don't know if they're riding magic carpets or they're wearing something other than boots. The fact is that we have 1,500 men and women who are going to be on the ground, and they need to be well led. I would encourage the president to identify an experienced general on the ground to be able to give them the flexibility and resources to implement their vision to be able to bring the fight to ISIS. I do not trust the Iraqi leadership to lead our people. I want to know who's going, who those 1,500 American service members are, what their skill sets are, what their mission is, and who's going to lead them. Because this is going to get worse before it gets better if we don't handle it right now like we should have done 6 months or a year ago.
ISIS is a serious threat that we have to step up to and we have to confront. But I'm very disturbed to hear my opponent say that he thinks the current strategy, which is not just the president's strategy, it's the strategy of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, it's the strategy of the intelligence community, is that it has 0 chance of success, because what I hear him saying, and he's stopping short of saying it, and please correct me if I'm wrong, but what I hear him saying is that he thinks this is a situation that's going to require the reintroduction of American ground troops in much larger numbers than the 11 or 1,200 or so who are there now. And my own view is that that would be a serious, if not tragic, mistake. Let's be clear about a couple of things. First off, the enemies that we are now fighting in Iraq, or that now confront themselves in the Middle East, were enemies that did not exist prior to our ill-fated, ill-advised invasion of Iraq. There was no Al-Qaeda in the Arabian Peninsula. There was no ISIS. There were no Shia militias. All of them were created for 2 reasons. One, to fill the vacuum that was created when a dictator was deposed. And the second is they wanted to repel the infidels. That's us. They wanted to repel the infidels. So if we go back in, what is there to say that 3, 4, 5, 6 years from now that we're not going to be confronting yet another new enemy? that doesn't exist now but will rise up. I will also say, we spent $30 billion training and equipping the Iraqi army. And I want to know why it is that we should put our young men and women at risk when the Iraqis won't even defend their own country. I think that's wrong. I don't see why our young men and women should defend their country. So, if I have any time left, I think we need to give the strategy a chance to work. It does have a chance to work, but I think for us to take a defeatist attitude now and say it has no chance to work is simply ill-advised.
Next question is from Kim of Eastport. And do you believe in term limits? And if you do, what do you think is a fair term? Tim?
I know what my opponent's answer is. I don't believe in term limits. I believe that doesn't come off my time, right? I believe that the Constitution and the founders, in their wisdom, built in term limits for at least the House of Representatives. Every 2 years, we present ourselves to the people. Every 2 years, the people make a judgment. And I think that is a very, very good system. Those of us who live in that system, Lee is 34 years old, it's the fourth time he's run in the last 6 years. We don't like running every 2 years, but it's a very good system in terms of holding us accountable. I will say this, and I know there are people in this audience who will disagree with this. I'm a better member of Congress today than I was when I was first elected. I know more. I know how to get things done better. I've grown in seniority, and that seniority matters. I've developed relationships with the agencies and the departments and the people that I need to have them with to serve my constituents. So I believe that the best way to deal with term limits is to have us put ourselves before the people we represent every 2 years. I do find it ironic that my opponent, who is practically half my age, is talking about term limits and is talking about people being career politicians. I'm 64 years old. This is the 7th time I've run for office. I spent 29 years in the private sector, almost as much time as he's been alive. And so I'm not a career politician. I'm a person who came to this late in life. He's 33 or 34?
34 and a half.
34 and a half. And this is the 4th time he's run for office, and he's talking about career politicians, and he's talking about term limits. I'm done.
Well, I support term limits for many different reasons. One of which is I believe that it's the intent of our founding fathers that we had people who would step up, they would bring their energy, their ideas, they would make an impact, and they would move on. When I started running for Congress, I had colleagues said, Lee, you could stay in the state Senate for 40 years. I said, I don't want to spend 40 years in the New York State Senate. I don't want to go down to Washington and make a career out of that. I want to bring my energy, my ideas, try to make a positive impact, and then move on. That's the intent of our founding fathers, and I think that we would be better served if we didn't have people, Charlie Rangel's there for what, 42, 44 years at this point. We get people who they get so comfortable and they stay there forever, and that stagnancy of ideas, it's not healthy, it's not helpful. I've actually, in my 4 years up in Albany, I've had 48 bills passed and signed into law. These were bills to cut taxes, cut fees, consolidate licensing, protect our military families from protests at military burials. My opponent's been in office for 12 years. He's had 4 bills passed and signed into law, all renaming post offices. And then my opponent was right, though, with regards to term limits. We do have term limits. That's on November 4th, and that's why I'm asking for your vote. Now, if you give me your vote, one of the great things about something that happens about 4.5 seconds after I take the oath is that I'm going to have more influence than the incumbent has right now, and he's been there for 12 years. The Republicans are going to keep control of the House, and I plan on doing everything in my power to represent my district. That's why we won't be answering questions related to Dune Road and hearing my best excuse when you're coming back 2 years from now. I'm looking forward to having the opportunity to hit the ground running on day one and to make sure that every single day I'm in office, I'm doing absolutely everything in my power to to represent the 1st Congressional District again. We don't need someone representing us like this is San Francisco. We need someone representing us like this is the East End of Long Island.
Next question comes from Helen of Riverhead. What can you do to maintain our national seashore and national park system from private business and concessions?
Well, here in the 1st Congressional District, we have an urgent need, as we discussed with an earlier question that was asked. We have an urgent need to protect our seashore. We are here in the middle of hurricane season. I'm sure every one of us, on a bipartisan basis, are praying that we don't get crushed by a hurricane. And we are vulnerable right now. We have, I live in Shirley. Mastic Beach is right next to us. It is, in my opinion, the most vulnerable hamlet in all of Long Island right now. But all across Fire Island, there is a need to be able to move forward with these projects. And there's just a lot of red tape and pushback, timelines, delays, a lot of announcements as to how this is going to get done in the future. But then that time comes and there's a new press conference to announce the new date. So I think that the best way that we can protect our seashores is making sure that that Sandy money that has gone everywhere else other than the 1st Congressional District comes here in 2015. The incumbent earlier pointed out that right after the storm hit, we had a couple of breaches that were filled. These barges left. I don't know why they didn't leave without finishing some of these other urgent needs at that time. Why it left, and now we're hearing that it's on the whether it's in California or if it's in Virginia, that these barges should be right here finishing this work to protect our barrier beaches. And there's also, and as my opponent pointed out, there is a temporary restraining order that was filed last week as a result of the Audubon Society. And I don't think that our federal government should be prioritizing piping plovers over humans. We have individuals who have not recovered yet from Sandy, and it is incumbent on anyone who is in office, whether you are a House member or a Senate member, or you are the president, to make sure that these vulnerable people are protected. It should have happened by now.
Couple things, just to go back to the last question, I'm just curiously, should I tell Ken LaValle that 40 years is too much, or do you want to tell him?
I actually, I love Ken LaValle. No, this can come out my time. I love Ken LaValle. He's a good man.
I do too.
Leave Ken LaValle out of this.
Have a consistent argument. Like I said earlier, it's always annoying to let the facts get in the way of a good attack. But let me say this. For my opponent to suggest that the federal government is placing piping plover, hard to say, habitat protection over life, limb, and property is simply wrong. I will remind my opponent that it is the Audubon Society who has taken that position, which in my view is an indefensible position. And I will tell you that the plan that was approved by every level of government, every office that has any jurisdiction whatsoever, did protect habitat, but did so in a way that also gave priority to shoreline protection and protecting the low-lying areas to the north of the bay system, which is, I think, has to be our priority. So I think that we are all frustrated that it has taken as long as it has. But in the same way that my opponent suggested that I should read the Affordable Care Act, which I have, by the way, I would suggest that he familiarize himself with the process that the Corps, Army Corps of Engineers, must follow to move a project from its suggestion to its implementation. It is a project that is long and cumbersome and difficult. And the bill that I just talked about before, the Water Resources Development Act, streamlines that process. And that was another issue that I was very actively engaged in because it does take too long. But I will say again, the project that's taking place on Fire Island is the first of 60 Sandy-related projects that are going forward under the 700 million, pardon me, that does not fall into the heading of an emergency project or fixing a previously constructed core project. And the reason it's the first is my advocacy.
1 minute.
This gets back to the point I was making earlier about how you have elected officials who come here when they're asking for your vote with their best excuse as to why nothing gets done, but they say, give me another 2 years and we'll get it done next time. If you go to newsday.com and you want to research my opponent or the Army Corps or doing replenishment, however you want to search, and read all of the stories, there have been so many different timetables that have been put out there, and we just keep extending it. Last summer, we all met, and the Army Corps said this was going to get done this winter. And then come winter time, they said it's going to get done in the spring. And come the spring, they said it's going to be done in September. Last week, the judge issued a temporary restraining order. As far as Ken Laval goes, one of the great examples of why we need term limits is because we have good people in office, and we have other people in office who are not as effective, who are not as strong of a voice for the people they represent. I don't advocate that every single person who gets term limited is not doing a great job representing their constituents. I'm saying that you're not doing a good job representing your constituents, and you need to get fired on it.
Time's up. Final question. Final question comes from M. Doyle of Porterville. What's your position on immigration reform? And Tim, you lead this one.
I support comprehensive immigration reform. I support the bill, the compromise bill that was passed in the Senate, passed with 68 votes. It was endorsed and written in part by John McCain, part by Lindsey Graham, part by Mark Rubio. It is a good bill. It is not a perfect bill. There is no such thing as a perfect fix to a very, very serious and complex problem. There is a bill in the House, H.R. 15, which is the Senate bill with House-added enforcement protections, or pardon me, border enforcement provisions that are stiffer than the provisions that are in the Senate bill. I am a co-sponsor of that bill, and I really do believe that this is what we need to do. There are all kinds of reasons why we should do it. But what's really important here is I hear my opponent say that we need to compromise. Guess what? He has also said that he cannot support comprehensive immigration reform because it's amnesty. The immigration reform bill that came out of the Senate is a compromise. So he says that he wants to compromise, but then when presented with a reasonable compromise, he says, oh, no, I can't support that because it's amnesty. Well, guess what? It's not amnesty. The path to earned legalization that is in the Senate bill, written by John McCain and Lindsey Graham and others, is a 15-year path that requires people to pay fines twice, to pay back taxes, to learn English, to learn civics, and maintain a clean record. Now, that's not a free pass. That's not amnesty. That is earning legalization. And it's the only humane, enforceable way to deal with a problem that has no easy answers. And if this isn't what my opponent will propose or support, please tell me what it is. Please tell me, is it round them up and send them back, which is what I hear people say? Is it attrition? Tell me what your plan is, Mr. Zeldin, because what I'm very, very clear on is what you don't support. What I have no clue on is what you do support.
The key two words of my opponent's answer were only way. Did you guys pick up on that? Only way. And one of the problems is in Washington, you have, and this is Republicans and Democrats, you get people who get behind a solution, and they get so invested in that one solution and their ways because they care about polling, they care about elections. their solution is declared the only way. And for me, I think that Republicans and Democrats need to talk to each other more to try to work out compromises, which doesn't always have to be the president getting his way, 100% of his way, all the time. Now, if you want to actually, and Republican administrations, Democratic administrations have tried to solve the challenges related to immigration in this country, and I support legal immigration. We are a nation of immigrants. We all have the immigrant story. But just because you put out a bill and you call it comprehensive immigration reform does not mean that that needs to be the only way. And if you want to solve any of the challenges related to immigration, this problem, you need to deal with legal immigration. And you need to secure our borders. You need to secure our borders. And what about having caring and having compassion for that family who is in another country and they want to come to America, but they go to their local consulate and they say, I want the American dream. I want American hope and American opportunity. How do I come there legally? And because they are following the rules, they don't get here. What about caring and compassion for them? I want to be part of a discussion on solving this problem, but I absolutely do not accept, I emphatically reject that your bill is the only way. That is unacceptable to me.
And it's time for our closing statements.
What's your plan?
Tim?
How long we have, 2 minutes?
2 minutes.
2 minutes. Real quick, this will be my closing statement. I listened very carefully to that answer. I still didn't hear a plan. I don't know what the answer is. No, I know, I've used both my rebuttals. I didn't.
No, you,
Wow.
yeah, one left.
Okay, I have a 1 minute rebuttal.
Okay.
My 1 minute rebuttal is this. I listened real carefully to his answer, and I did not hear a proposal. Everybody agrees we need stiffer border protection. It's in the bill. Everybody agrees we need to fix the visa system. It's in the bill. Everybody agrees we need better internal enforcement. It's in the bill. What people don't agree on is what do we do with the 12 to 15 million people who are here now? That's the key to this, okay? Everybody can agree on pieces of it, but if we can't agree on the 12 to 15 million and how to deal with them, we're going to be having this debate year after year after year. Now, the Republicans in the House of Representatives simply dropped the ball. John Boehner said he was here on Saturday to raise money for my opponent. He said on Friday that he thinks comprehensive immigration reform will help the economy. He wishes we would do it. Well, guess what, Mr. Boehner? You're in charge of the House. So why haven't we even discussed it? Why hasn't it come to the floor for a vote? I'll tell you why it hasn't. He made a proposal, and he had a revolt on the far right. His far right said that they weren't going to support him as Speaker if he were to bring those proposals to the floor. So he is the one that's reading polls. He is the one that's stepping away from trying to solve a serious problem.
Now we're going to have our closing statement, 2 minute closing statement, and Tim, you lead off.
Thank you. You know, my opponent has made several pejorative references to me. That's I think, par for the course. But he has made several references about how he's suggesting coyly that I form my positions based on polls and based on getting elected. Well, I supported comprehensive immigration reform when I first ran for office 12 years ago. And when I first ran for office 12 years ago, only about 30% of this district supported that. Now about 65% of this district supported it. So I was right then, I believe, but I took a position that I believed in. I didn't take a position that was driven by polls. And I think that's what you want out of a member of Congress. I think what you want out of a member of Congress is someone who's going to study the issues, try to find where the right path forward is, and then be willing to stand on that right path, irrespective of what comes at it. That's what I've done throughout my career. Now, Ed Koch used to say that if you agree with me 50% of the time, vote for me. If you agree with me 100% of the time, get your head examined. Now, I don't expect anyone to agree, anybody in this auditorium can agree with anyone else in this auditorium 100% of the time. That's the essence of our democracy. That's what makes our country great. That we do disagree. We try to disagree civilly. And so, what I have dedicated myself to is serving the people I was elected to represent, and I will say immodestly that I've done a damn good job of that. I have also dedicated myself to knowing every inch of this district. I do. I've also dedicated myself to learning everything that I need to know about the issues that confront us, and then trying to use what I know to make the judgments that are in the best interest of the people I represent and will move this country forward. I've done that. I ask for your vote.
So my opponent has just told you that he doesn't support the Obama-Pelosi agenda because it polls well. He supports it because he actually believes in it. And it is good that there is a healthy disagreement on where we stand on issues. Again, as I mentioned earlier, I've actually enjoyed working with the congressman, where we have mutual constituents, where we can help people. And that ultimately, I think, is the calling to get involved and to run in the first place. It really is an honor to be able to serve the military, to serve in the New York State Senate, to represent this place that I call home. And we have a lot of important challenges here. But there are two very different paths that the incumbent and I want to see this country head. And hopefully we gave you a taste of that. And you know what? There might have been some of you here who listened to the incumbent talk about some of his positions on issues, and you agree with him. And that's okay. There are a lot of other issues that I believe, if you want to grow our economy and create good paying private sector jobs, if you want to fight for our veterans who fought for us, so by the way, 75% of Congress used to be military veterans. That number now is less than 1 in 5. If you want to secure our borders and protect America's interests overseas, if you want to repeal and replace Obamacare, if you want to stop Common Core, I will offer up my ideas on the best solutions facing the best solutions you can think of to represent you in Washington. But you know what? You may not agree with me on everything, and that's okay. I personally believe Common Core is not the answer. As an example, you have standards created by the federal government, tests created by the state, curriculum set by the local school districts, and nobody's talking to each other. On all of these issues, hopefully as we go through the Meet the Candidate nights and the debates, you have an opportunity to hear where we stand on the issues that matter to you most. This election is important, but there is no way that we are going to change Washington if we keep re-electing this guy.
We're not done yet.
What?
I'd like to thank both candidates for coming out tonight. I would have to say it's probably a much better night to go for a walk on the beach than come here in Kyle Lights. I'd like to ask the government class to come up. Alex, come up first and wait your government class up so they can meet the candidates and we can get a photo.